One of the characters in the game is a top performer on your team. She's incredibly driven. She's unbelievably successful. She doesn't require a lot of attention in the game, and her engagement stays up, her skill sets stay up. So over the course of the game, which is played over these multiple quarters, you kind of start to forget about this person. And then she up and resigns on you because she feels like you weren't cultivating her. And unfortunately, as a manager, you were spending your time with the other people on the team that needed a lot more of your attention. So a huge lesson in the game is like, how do you spread your time effectively from your top performers and also some of your people that potentially need more coaching?
Hey, you're listening to the Friends in Austin podcast. I'm your host, Justin Talent, and every week I bring you the stories of the people of Austin. Thank you for listening. Welcome back to Friends in Austin. Today, my guest is Matthew Confer, and you talk a lot about leadership, right? And you, I guess, coach or teach leadership at a company?
Correct. So I'm the VP of Strategy at Ability, which is an Austin-based company. We do leadership development training in about 30 countries around the world for corporate, university, and nonprofit clients.
Well, that's a lot. So the company, the entire purpose of the company is to coach leaders.
Yeah, exactly. We're kind of frequently put into manager development, executive development programs, and we have an experiential learning approach to it. So in the same way as a pilot would train on a simulator before they would fly a plane, we've built immersive technological simulators for managers and executives in corporate America.
Oh, well, what are these immersive technologies? This is intriguing. Are we doing VR leadership training?
No, so I say immersive because there's a gamified approach to it. It is a browser-based game that you're playing with your teammates. So no VR goggles, no AR goggles. You're basically sitting at your desk in what was used to be maybe a classroom or a boardroom. Now it's at home because we're all virtually training, learning, and working. And you're making decisions in the simulator based on your management style, based on financial decisions, based on decision making that you have to make, and you're competing with the other teams in the game.
But it's a little better than one of these things that are like, if Shannon shows you her boobs, you should.
It's the entire premise of the company is that we as leaders need some real world practice. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to learn how to be a manager or a leader in corporate America just because clicking through in e-learning, you read a segment online, you answer A, B, or C, and then you just move on to the next question. Mm-hmm. That's really not what it's like to operate in a corporation.
Okay, so I'm assuming that your clients are fairly big companies, right? I mean, medium to large size companies.
Good assumption. Our biggest clients in a given year would be somebody like Dell here in town. Mm-hmm. It's a big client. Coca-Cola is a big client. Marriott Hotels has been a client. Target is a client. So mid to large organizations.
I want to ask kind of like how this whole, I don't know if I want to call it leadership industry, but the whole thing around leadership, I feel like I've been hearing more about it in the past so many years, and people are getting a little better about like coaching their team members to be better leaders, et cetera, because they can see how it can probably affect their bottom line, keep their employees happier. But before I ask you about all that stuff, I'm curious, these browser-based games, do you pay a third party to develop that stuff? Or
thankfully they were actually all developed in-house. We have a technical team that both builds the simulation, manages the simulation, handles any issues when they arise, and then builds our new products. So thankfully we have built all of that in-house. We're about 15 total employees, about half in Austin, half elsewhere. And then we have 80 or so facilitators around the world who are certified to teach the simulations.
Okay, cool. So these browser-based games, I mean, what do they look like? I mean, it puts you in a situation that you might be in that is, again, like I said, we've all seen those little like questionnaires where it's like, obviously this is the answer. Like, yep. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. So here's the big difference. Like our people manager simulation, you're managing these 6 virtual employees. So when you log into the simulation, the employees have a profile, they have videos introducing you to them. But then you as the manager need to decide who you want to coach, when you want to coach them, how you want to recognize your employees, what employees you want to put on certain projects. And any decision that you make, it's almost a choose your own adventure style adventure. Any decision you make, they send you an email. They send you a little Slack message. So they're actually reacting to what you're doing. And all of the other teams in the game are facing the same challenge. So you're technically competing with them in terms of who's going to score the most points, who's going to get the most engaged employees. And that's where the competitive and the team component really comes in. Yeah.
Are you guys just like gathering data behind the scenes to make an AI to replace all the managers? Is that really what's going on here?
We're not doing that. The biggest change that we've made is 3 years ago, we launched what we called the Invited MBA here in Austin. And the perspective was, to your earlier question, which was extremely accurate, we tend to work with medium to like massive organizations. And this is training that we believed could help a lot of people. So we wanted to try to disrupt the higher education industry. So we launched a 12-week mini MBA at under $2,000 to try to give anybody, not just an executive at Dell Computers, the ability to learn what it means to be an effective leader. So that's like the next iteration of our company. It's been an extremely successful product. It's had fits and starts. We're trying to figure out where the product market fit is, but that I think is the direction we're going.
That's really exciting and really cool. I think it goes more into kind of like how college is super lacking because it's kind of broad and sometimes it can help, but like I get a lot of value out of when it comes to software development. I learn way more when I just buy courses that people made that are very direct about what I want to do right now. I learn so much on those, and they're usually anywhere from $100 to $250. And, maybe I pay for 2 or 3 of them a year. Now, when it comes to like managing at a company, no one really teaches you how to be a good manager in college. Like I didn't go through an MBA program, so I wouldn't really know, but my assumption is that in an MBA program, they probably touch on management and they talk about management, but I would have a feeling that it's pretty dry and probably kind of outdated. So for some company to come in, and I hope more companies do certain things like these, and education kind of gets completely reworked to where like you don't need... Well, education one continues after college, right?
Yep,
so
exactly.
You can pay for these programs and stuff like that keep you up to date and kind of whatever specific to your particular job, whatever particular role you have. It'd be nice to be able to pay a reasonable amount of money to continue that education and then give yourself more confidence in your job. So essentially that's what you guys are doing with leadership. The
big thing that we heard from people when we thought about launching a mini MBA is it's petrifying to think about taking 2 years of your life and $100,000 and commit to something that might not be the right decision for you. The right decision for you might be to continue working at your company or go join a nonprofit or volunteer and do something to get the management skills, the leadership skills that you need. Our thought was there was an area in the market for a lower priced offering that was 12 weeks rather than 2 years that got at those skills. But to your point, also included networking, time with advisors, the ability to actually grow yourself as a professional. And thankfully it's worked out for us, but I think there's still a lot that we need to do to make it the product that we hope it will be.
Are you able to like have any metrics around like once you've coached a leader at a company, are they able to measure the performance or the change after that?
So one of the things that your earlier comment made me think a lot about is why have there been all of these companies and changes in the leadership development and professional development industry? There's so many companies going after this. And I think the reason is younger workers, in order to retain them and recruit them, you as an organization need to say that we have professional development opportunities. It's not you're going to work for one company for 50 years and you're just going to slowly move up the ladder. You're going to be moving between different companies. You want to go to certain companies for certain skills. So on the question of ROI, how do we measure that there's actually a visible return from doing one of our trainings? We focus a lot on surveys. How do you feel after this training? Do you feel more prepared to do your job? Do you feel like you actually tested your comfortable limits? And if you want to try a different way to be a leader, is this an opportunity for you to practice without real world consequences? So we're really focused on how did you feel going into this training? How do you feel going out of it? And we have some clients who try to test, did people who go through this training, were they more likely to be retained? Were they more likely to stay with the company 5 years later? Were they more likely to get promoted? And those are the types of questions that we're hoping to track over a longer time frame.
When you talked about retention and basically and satisfaction and career development, it's like millennials get a lot of shit for like, oh, they don't stay at the same job for very long and they're lazy and they're entitled, which I think all of those things are kind of true to some degree. But on the other side of that is like, The model as it was to stay at a company for a long time, and I feel like people used to actually get rewarded for that. Which in these days, I'm talking to friends, talking to a lot of people, it's like the raises are hardly keeping you up with inflation. It's like you always get a higher raise if you're incentivized to leave the company. Yep. Essentially, you're just incentivized to leave the company, and people act like at the end of the day, much like computers would. I mean, like, it's business. We're not here to make you feel better. Like, if someone else is going to give me more money, I'm going to go work for them. So I feel like the companies need to do a better job of like thinking about how they can keep their employees and not complaining and bitching and moaning that millennials are lazy and this and that. I mean, if you want the good people, they're going to leave because they're going to get more money.
I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that it's more than just money. Money is great. Money makes the world go round. If I stay with a company for a long time and I do an incredible job, I expect to be compensated fairly. But I think compensation is a large picture. Compensation is the benefits you get, how you feel about the coworkers that you get to interact with, how you feel about your time off, how you feel about your remote work opportunities. I think companies that talk openly about the whole package that they're offering tend to do a much better job recruiting top talent and retaining top talent. And in my estimation, I think professional development is a part of that. If you don't feel like you're getting better as a professional at this job, it doesn't matter how much they pay you. I don't think there's that much rewarding in your own development.
For sure. And I think it's good that people are focusing on that now. I mean, that's always been super important to me. It's like, I want to know where I'm going on the next step. Like, I want to do a good job at what I'm doing, but I want to know that I'm going somewhere else, because to keep yourself, not only for more money, but also to keep yourself engaged, like mentally and everything else, you need to have an incentive. So you use surveys then to judge the feeling of the person, which is probably a decent measurement. I mean, like, people always say like happy employees make happy customers, exactly. Right? And happy managers probably make happy subordinates, which then make happy customers. So it goes on down to the organization. How did you guys, so it's 15 people. How did you get to be the VP of the company? Are you VP of a particular section or a VP of the company?
So I'm a VP at the company. I run sales and strategy. Okay. So I came to the firm about 3 years ago, and I am the quintessential like LinkedIn success story, in the sense that it was a connection on LinkedIn who talked to me about the job. I met with 3 people from the company. A week later, I was at the house of the CEO interviewing with him. And a week after that, I had given my 2 weeks notice and left the job that I was at previously. So I'm kind of a pound the table type person of cultivating a network online, because of the 4 jobs that I've had in my life, LinkedIn has led to 2 of the 4 of them. And I've been exceptionally happy that I made this decision. So I have the pleasure of kind of working with all of our prospective new clients to talk to them about our offerings and share what other clients have used our services for.
Congrats for getting in on that job. And it's funny, he interviewed you at his house. That's odd, but whatever floats your boat.
Thankfully, at a small company, I met everybody that I was going to work with before I decided to make the decision. And I started my career at Deloitte Consulting. So for any of your listeners who are familiar, 100,000 plus employees globally, massive organization. The difference from starting my career there to now working for a company of under 20 people, to me, I found the right place, but I think I benefited a lot from working at a large company first. And so, I never would have gone to the house of the CEO at Deloitte, but thankfully at a 15-person company based in Austin, I was able to meet with him personally before making the decision to leave my other job.
I hope that when you got to his house, he was like, we got some cigars and here's a glass of whiskey. Here's how the interview's going to go.
Wasn't like that.
I want to pretend it was.
I'll pretend it was too. Yeah.
Let's see how good you do at drinking this whiskey. But I don't know. Yeah, a lot of people say that about working at big companies versus small companies. I've never worked for a big company, and I'm kind of glad I never have, because everybody that I talk to, they say the same thing. Like, it was a good learning experience, but I wouldn't do it again.
I think what you learn at a big company is efficiency and operations. Like, it's incredible how companies can get 50,000, 100,000 people, 200,000 people aligned on somewhat of a central mission. And you start to learn that bureaucracy is tough sometimes, but it also like makes the train run on the tracks. Now that I work at a smaller company, I love that I have autonomy to do things that I want. But as a result, 100% of what I want to get accomplished usually falls on my doorstep. Whereas at a big company, if I need to talk to a client and I want to send them a research report, there's 12 people that are working together to create that research report, doing all of the interviews. The technology works seamlessly because you have an IT team of 2,000 people around the globe that are making sure that everything runs on time. So definitely pros and cons. I've found the right spot for me, but I can definitely say that I learned a lot about how to run an efficient organization.
For sure. So, I mean, that's one of the things you mentioned, autonomy. So, God, I don't remember. Maybe it was Daniel Pink that had a book about this. Drive. He has a book called Drive, and I think another one, I forget what it's called, but it's about employee satisfaction.
Yep.
And autonomy is one of them.
Yep.
Which is unfortunate that I feel like there's probably ways for bigger organizations to find a way to give more people more autonomy, even though they have to go through 12 people to get something done. I don't know what that is, but maybe they could kind of get more creative about getting people more of a feeling of autonomy. Mm-hmm. But it's very hard to get the level of autonomy you're going to get at a smaller company, right? Because again, like, yeah, if you screw up, it's a lot on your shoulders. But at the same time, it's like, it makes you want to go to work every day because you can do something that makes a difference really fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you've been working there for 2 years. You worked, is that right?
3 years, yeah.
3 years. You worked for Deloitte before that. Where are you from?
I actually was born in Michigan, moved to Idaho, moved to Missouri, moved to Arizona, and then to New Hampshire, and spent high school, college, first job in the New England area. So moved around a ton as a kid. And then about 7 years ago, I had met my now wife in Boston. We were both working at Deloitte at the time. Love Boston. It's an incredible city, have friends and family there, but hated the cold to no end, and was given the opportunity or asked to transfer both of our jobs out to Austin. Our boss was supportive, and from a geographic and from a lifestyle perspective, I think it was the best decision that we ever made. That was about 7 years ago.
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm from the Midwest, and I also hated the cold. And it's like, I'm so glad that I live somewhere warm, really. Yeah. I mean, it's most of it, right? It's just the fact that it's warm.
Exactly.
I mean, there's got cool things to boot. What are some other interesting things we could talk about when it comes to ability?
I think the thing that we've experienced over the last 15 months is this massive change to work from home, virtual work, and all of those components. So pre-pandemic, we did about 60% of our trainings in person. Our clients loved that about us. They loved the interactivity, the bring everybody together, go to a hotel, do like an offsite event, super fun. Now people are embracing virtual with honestly more intensity than we thought they would. We have clients that are bringing people back to the office, but actually making the decision that they want to continue to train remotely, and they want to continue to develop people when they're staying at home and they don't need to commute to an offsite at a hotel, and people are embracing it. So I think it's going to be fascinating to see what happens in work more broadly. You mentioned before we started that you work from home. I meet with more and more people who can't imagine going back to the office. And I think that's going to be a fascinating development.
I'm really fascinated by that as well. And I kind of wish I had like a hidden camera, like at some of these companies that are like, yeah, everyone has to come back to the office. I wish like I could see the person on the other end of the computer, like looking through the email of their other job offers. You know what I mean?
Well, and the interesting thing is I think back to my time at Deloitte. I was right out of college. I loved being in the office. Like, you worked hard, but then you went out with all of your coworkers after. You had lunch with all of your coworkers. There were the quintessential, at the coffee station or the water cooler. Like, you were interacting with people and talking about the day. As somebody who's later on in their career, who has a family at home, I love that work is more flexible now. But I think about what would I feel like if I was 10 years younger, early on in my career, and wanted to learn from people in person, not learn from people over Zoom. And I think that's the really tough challenge that companies are going to have.
That's interesting. So my first job was remote. And I, like I told you before, I worked that remote job. I worked several remote jobs. I didn't work at an office till I came to Austin. I did that by choice. I guess I just kind of wanted to see what it would be like to work in an office. I mean, I worked non-remote outside of software, but before I started doing software, all remote. And that was something that I noticed, because when I moved to Austin and I got an apartment, I met some people in the apartment complex, and I noticed that many of them have a lot of friends from their office and stuff like that. And in the companies that I even worked at, most of them were so small that, like, even if there was an office, only one or two of them would have even been my age, et cetera. But I saw some benefits. I knew some people that worked at Big Commerce and got their IPO money. Good for them. They have a lot of friends from Big Commerce. And I was like, that seems kind of fun working for a large company like that. I mean, it is kind of like a lot of hang out after work. But on the note of, I don't know that it's, I mean, I made plenty of friends, like I just knew that I wasn't going to find any friends at work, and I found them elsewhere and still made plenty of friends. But so I don't know that anyone's really missing out too much. Maybe. I just think that if you live downtown in a city, at least, and you live in an apartment, you're going to make a lot of friends. Some people I know, they like move straight to the suburbs and bought a house. And I was talking to my cousin about this, and he's like, I think that's a mistake. I mean, everyone runs their life in the way that they want to run their life, but I would have felt like I missed out on a lot if I went straight to the suburbs, like in my early 20s, like, and not moved downtown to an apartment. So like, especially working remote, like
exactly.
Who would I have made friends with, like with those two things combined? You know what I mean?
Well, when we started the Invited MBA, our original intent was to make it an Austin only program and then hopefully expand it to other cities. The pandemic forced us to go fully virtual with it. It was the best thing that ever happened because, to your point, we heard from people that what they wanted was to build a network with like-minded professionals globally, and virtual allows you to do that in a way that just wasn't possible before. You can video chat in real time with somebody halfway around the world and work with them on a case study or a group project. And so we're extremely bullish about the opportunities for virtual education, virtual networking going forward. We think it allows us as a company. It was really cumbersome to run a 20-person program here in Austin, to find space, to do all of those things. We're running 60 people now all the way around the world, all the way around the country, more effectively than we were able to run a smaller group here in Austin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so your software was already, I mean, you were already doing essentially remote leadership training, right? I mean,
correct.
You're using a web browser, and this was before COVID. So you didn't really have to, what did you have to change then? I mean,
so the biggest change was the way our facilitators taught the simulation. So like I mentioned, a lot of our companies used us as like these big milestone achievements. So you're at a big company, you just got promoted to senior manager, you get to go through this 6-month leadership program, and we were a part of that. And they would fly everybody who was going through this program to a gorgeous hotel in San Diego as a congratulations, and you'd meet the company's directors and you might do our simulation. So we had facilitators that would fly all the way around the world to do these events. February of 2020, March of 2020 happens, and everybody decides to go virtual. So we have a lot of facilitators that are incredibly dynamic in the classroom. They're less dynamic staring at a screen. And so we needed to retrain our facilitators. We needed to restructure the way we organized events. We needed to build stronger back-end software to handle all of the people logging in from their home versus logging in from a corporate site that potentially had better Wi-Fi. So there were a lot of things that we had to change to make our company malleable for a fully virtual future.
Gotcha. I was wondering, so what kind of stuff then? I mean, can we go ahead and dive into a little bit of what you guys teach?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't need to go to, I'm sure we could go an hour on that probably, but like some of the bigger, broader topics or whatever of what kind of things you're seeing really effective in this leadership training. And this is, again, targeted at probably like middle level managers, et cetera, maybe even execs, as you said.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I talked a little bit about the management simulation before. The other simulations we have are financial acumen. So legitimately, what's a balance sheet? What's an income statement? What's cash flow? But instead of learning about it and reading about it, you're actually making financial decisions and seeing the impact. So you're setting the price, you're setting payment terms, you're deciding how much of a loan your company wants to take out from the bank. So we're actually teaching you how the heck does a company make money? The other simulation is decision making. So you're building a business from the ground up and you're competing with the other teams in a dynamic market. So we're teaching you potentially how to decide between multiple products. That game has employees that you need to cultivate, and you could potentially lose to the other teams in the game. So we're teaching you as a manager how to balance not overworking people, but making sure that you still have the staff to get products out the door. If I go full circle back to the management simulation, the biggest lesson there is about motivators. It's about understanding these 6 characters in the game. They're all motivated by totally different things. And they send you emails, you watch videos with them, you role play with these characters, and you need to decide what motivates the certain people. So a huge part of management is realizing that what motivates you to come to the office is potentially vastly different than what motivates the people who work for you. And if you spend some time trying to understand your people with that lens, you by your very nature are a more effective manager.
Makes a lot of sense. There's got to be some very common things that motivate people, right? Like, what in addition to that, I mean, when they're analyzing these people for their motivators, what are the set of things that could be their motivator?
Yeah, one of the characters in the game is a top performer on your team. She's incredibly driven. She's unbelievably successful. She doesn't require a lot of attention in the game, and her engagement stays up, her skill sets stay up. So over the course of the game, which is played over these multiple quarters, you kind of start to forget about this person. And then she up and resigns on you because she feels like you weren't cultivating her. And unfortunately, as a manager, you were spending your time with the other people on the team that needed a lot more of your attention. So a huge lesson in the game is like, how do you spread your time effectively from your top performers and also some of your people that potentially need more coaching? Another example is one of the characters in the game is really talented, but has no desire to become a manager. They are just very comfortable being an individual contributor. And you receive pressure in the game via an email to try to promote this individual to a manager. And the character pushes back on you. So how do you handle employees who are just very happy in their role, but they potentially don't have managerial aspirations? So how do you handle those dynamics? I think is something that myself, early in my career, you struggle with because you've never done it before. So how do we put you in a situation to test and teach you those types of things?
That's really interesting. Yeah. Cause I mean, these are kind of like very, quintessential samples or whatever of these people exist for sure. Cause yeah, I can totally see like, you'll have that top performer that like, oh, everything's fine. Then they're gone. Yeah. Just gone. Cause they're the kind of person it's like, they've got things going on, like they got an offer or whatever, and then they're not going to like tell you about it. Yeah. So and then you got people, there's a lot of those people too, that they don't want to be a manager because they know that it would change their job a lot. Like say you're a software developer and then it's like now you're moving to software development management. You're going to be writing less code. You're more dealing with people. And a lot of programmers don't want to deal with people. That's why they're programmers. You know what I mean? So yeah, those are some good examples. What other things when it comes to leadership?
The thing that we tried to design the Invited MBA around was, how do you condense what a traditional business education would be? And a huge component of that is making finance less scary. Finance scares the bejesus out of a lot of people. You might be an employee at a public company, and every quarter your company has to tell you how they did, and they tell the investment community, and you might listen to the call where they explain the assets and liabilities of the company and have no idea what is going on. And if you didn't come from a traditional finance background, you might have never needed to know. But what we hear from our clients is that people who ascend, people who get to higher levels at corporations, have a general base understanding of what a P&L statement is and how the company figures out the profit margin on a given product. And so a huge component of what we tried to do with the Invited MBA is make finance more approachable for people who don't come from a finance background. That's something that we've heard from people is the biggest thing that they feel like is potentially missing in their professional toolkit as they try to ascend at an organization.
Interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that. That makes sense though. Yeah. So like you're saying, statistically speaking, this people that get up higher in an organization understand finance better.
Well, and I think the other thing is we have the luxury of working with people from a lot of different departments. So if we're training a company, we might have one person in the training who's a human resource professional. We might have somebody from the legal department. We might have somebody from sales. We might have somebody from tech or, software development. The people who ascend at that organization that grow to be the leaders of those departments have to manage a P&L statement. They have to manage the profit and loss for their department. And the thing about corporate America, which makes sense, is you promote people because they were really good at their job, not because they're incredible leaders, because the people who ascend are the people who do their job the best. But those people might not have the managerial skills or the financial skills to actually be the leaders that the company needs. And I think that's where we can fit that need.
That makes a lot of sense. So you have a podcast that you do. Is it in combination with this company or
it is. So
agility, right?
Yeah, ability.
I'm kind of kidding around. In combination with ability?
Yeah. So in combination with ability and the Invited MBA, in March of last year, during the first kind of part of the pandemic, we had heard from a lot of our clients that they wanted a podcast to talk about leadership development, to talk with authors and academics about what the current research says about what an effective leader looks like. So we launched a podcast called Learn to Lead. It was a very fun endeavor for me because, as we were talking about before we hit record, I've been a podcast fan for probably 8 or 9 years of my life and had never thought about starting one. It's been a lot of fun. I've got to talk to everybody from the chief learning officer at Intel all the way to a memory champion, a guy who spends his entire life focused on memory games and competing in memory competitions. We just talked to the CEO of Hint Water, the beverage company, and I've got to talk to leaders about how they grew as leaders. I've gotten to talk to authors about how they're thinking about leadership development more broadly, and I've gotten to talk to professors who are teaching leadership development kind of on the front line. So it's been a lot of fun.
Very cool. Sounds like a lot of fun for sure. How were you finding the guests and stuff like that when you got started? How many episodes are
So we're about 65 episodes in.
Well, that's a lot. It's about the same or more episodes than I've done over the past year or so.
Yeah, and we're at about the same time frame.
Okay.
And I would say 90% or so of the guests have come from LinkedIn messages.
Oh.
Either people have found the podcast via my LinkedIn page, our company's LinkedIn page, and just given that we're in the world of kind of professional development, people's social network of choice, I guess, in many ways, is LinkedIn. So we're trying to grow on Instagram. We're trying to meet more people via social media, but it's a hard slog out there to build a podcast. We've thankfully have a robust, client list and email list of people in our network, but it's tough, but it's been a ton of fun.
Yeah. I mean, I would definitely having the clients and the, kind of the executive and then management people and all that, like, should give you some good context into some people that are kind of higher up at a company or whatever, which can make for some interesting podcasts. How broad are the topics? I mean, I know generally leadership, right? But I mean, you said you talked to the memory guy. I don't know how you tied that into leadership, but is it pretty loose on like what you talk about?
Yeah. So the reason that we talked to the memory guy is actually a few listeners had reached out and said one of the things that they struggled with is like building relationships with people. And like even somebody said, even remembering people's names, like actually building a relationship with somebody is remembering something from their past and bringing that up in the next conversation that you have with them. I had just finished watching.
That is brilliant. That's so true. I mean, it's like, just, hey, you paid attention to what I was saying.
Exactly.
I like you more.
So I had just finished watching the Netflix documentary Memory Games, and I just reached out to one of the stars of the documentary. Basically, his entire life is going around the world competing in memory competitions. And so it was more of a bucket list conversation that I wanted to talk to him, but I was able to weave in the fact that to be a good leader, there are some skills that are outside of the realm of a normal traditional education, memory being one of them. I've talked to a professor of negotiations. I think negotiations is a key component of being a leader.
More people should learn to negotiate, especially their salary, everything. Like people say, everything is negotiable. most things are. My friend negotiates his rent every year. Like
there you go.
And he always gets it to go down. Like, and most people they don't even negotiate. There's like, that's the rent this year.
Yeah.
But yeah, so go on.
So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to appeal to somebody who's thinking about themselves as a leader. We've talked to some of our audience members and they kind of fit into three weird buckets. Bucket one is somebody early in their career who wants to learn from other leaders how they became successful. Bucket two is someone mid-career who's looking to level up their leadership skills. And then bucket three is actually our clients, which are basically people at companies who are designing leadership programs, and they want to learn from the authors and academics who are doing this type of work, what they should be including in their program.
How much prep do you do for the podcast? Does it take up a decent amount of your time? Or
It's about 30 to 45 minutes before each episode. I have like a Google Doc that has some high level questions that I want to ask every guest. I copy, create a new version, and then I basically spend 30 minutes trying to watch or read everything that I can about the guests. And then I kind of just ask the questions that I would want to ask. I hate to say it this way, but I almost care less about the audience. I hope that the questions that I would find interesting about these people are interesting to our audience. And then we try to solicit questions from our audience. And that's really helped me, I think, get a good blend of the questions that I would want to ask and the questions that our audience would want to ask.
That sounds like a great way to go about it. Plus, I mean, that was always been my approach, is like, I'm just going to ask you questions that pop into my head at any random time or just in the midst of the conversation. Like, I do plan some of them, but sometimes I find that like I don't even use any of it because once you start talking, like it's just, turns into something else, and whatever you were going to ask is no longer relevant, or you would have asked it anyway.
Yeah.
But all you can really do is ask the questions that are interesting to you. I don't know how you could like go robotically about a podcast. It's like, let me find the things that would be the most cool to talk about that I may not care about, and then memorize those and then ask about it. Like, you just can't do that.
I'm a huge proponent that I think you need to make your career what you want it to be. And when I joined Ability 3 years ago, one thing that I really wanted to do is I wanted to help us reach a broader audience outside of just traditional corporate learning and development organizations. And so I was approached by the TED organization about 2.5 years ago to do a TED talk about decision making, and then this podcast. So that and the podcast have been the two most enjoyable things that I've ever done. And honestly, they have nothing directly to do with my job, but it's allowed me to meet more people who have potentially, and some of them have, become clients, become facilitators of ours. So I view it kind of holistically as my job is to tell more people about the work that we're doing.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the best part about a podcast, really. And at the very least, what you'll get out of a podcast is meeting a lot of people and learning a lot from them. And then also that can open the door to like making more money or getting a different, like maybe you're a freelancer, whatever it is, like getting a client, stuff like that. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah.
So how did that TED Talk go? Did you prepare a shitload for it? I mean, it's a long time to talk, like I've never had to really, God, I haven't publicly spoken probably since high school. Like, I mean, you know what I mean?
So it was something that I was originally interested in potentially doing it. And then when I joined Ability, I realized that over the course of a 3-year period, we had over 20,000 people participate in one of our simulations. And so I've gotten the chance to facilitate a lot of those simulations. And I feel like I've seen firsthand what effective decision-making looks like. Our games are stressful, they're time constrained, they're competitive. And in those moments, I think I've seen people who are really good decision makers rise above the rest. And so when I talked to the TED organizers for an event in Dallas, I said, I want to do a talk about decision making. I have a 3-step framework that we've developed after watching tens of thousands of people go through our simulation. And to your question, yeah, it's a ton of prep work. You have to prepare the talk. You have to send everything to them that you're thinking about including. Then you have to walk through the script with them multiple times. And you get one shot. They say go on stage, and there's no chance for them to hit pause, rewind, or edit something out. Whatever you do is going on the website. And the talk was called Before You Decide, and it's been without a doubt the best thing that I've done in my professional career in terms of people reaching out to me. I probably have 2 or 3 people a month, literally from all around the world, say that they somehow found the TED Talk and they're doing XYZ. Some of those people have become clients of ours. Some of those people have become podcast guests. And honestly, some of those people have just become LinkedIn acquaintances, but it's been a lot of fun.
You love LinkedIn, don't you?
I love LinkedIn. I could not be happier with the jobs that I've gotten from it, the people I met. When I moved to Austin, my wife jokes with me that I legitimately had 20 to 30 coffees in a 6-month period with just people that I was just randomly reaching out to on LinkedIn saying, I'm brand new to this city. I think the job that you have is interesting. I had no ulterior motives. I didn't need a job at that time. I was employed. I just wanted to meet people, and it ended up working out well. I still have friends that I met that first 6 months here.
Hey, everyone. This is your host, Justin. I just wanted to thank everyone for listening and give those that are new to the podcast a reminder to please subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast player. If you're on YouTube, please like the video, share it with a friend. That helps us out. Thank you. You're a natural good networker, and then you like doing it a lot. Sometimes I like doing it, sometimes I don't. Like, it's a totally different, there's a wide array of how much people like networking, but geez, it's really important. Like, in the fact that you're just sitting there getting coffees, like for no reason, but like there wasn't like an immediate outcome that was in mind. Yeah, if more people did that, it'd probably go a really long way, because I mean, and people say it all the time, and it's still very true. It's a lot of everything is kind of who you know that thought of you at that time.
Exactly.
Like there's an opportunity, and you have to pop into their head. You know what I mean? And if you're not putting yourself out there to be in anybody's head, like those opportunities are not going to come your way.
I couldn't agree more. Mm-hmm. And I do think that some of it does just happen organically. Some of it you have to really think about and do. But some of it is, you know, I go on a podcast like this, I talk about the TED Talk. Somebody out there watches the TED Talk, which makes it slightly more likely to get recommended by the TED algorithm, which makes it slightly more likely that 100 more people in a month will watch it. And then those types of things snowball. And that's how I feel about those first meetings I had in Austin. I can't remember every one of them, but some of them snowballed into the relationship that ended up leading to the job that I have now. And I never could have known that at that time.
And this was through LinkedIn messaging that you were setting up these coffees?
Yeah, I have absolutely no shame in connecting with people on LinkedIn. The thing that I think I do that's better than most is I do a little bit of research. So when I reach out to them, I actually give them a reason why I want to connect. And it's not just, I'm looking for a job or I want to build my network. I legitimately find something from their background that I find interesting, and I reference that in the message. I get a ton of LinkedIn connections. Everybody gets a ton of social media connections. I tend to pay way more attention to the ones that I feel like have spent that extra 5 to 10 minutes finding out something about me and giving me a rationale for why they're connecting.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm not really a heavy LinkedIn user at all. I've only it's like, here's my resume, you know, and then most of the messages that I get, of course, are software recruiters, but I've never really had anyone message me that I can recall that was just like, hey, what's up? Saw you do podcasting, or another programmer that was like, hey, saw you're also a programmer in Austin, blah, blah, blah. Like, do you want to meet up and talk about coding, or, you know, what's it been like? How's the job market here? Are there some good companies? You know, I probably would have said yes to anything that fit that criteria, but I haven't received any of those, you know?
Well, my entire professional career has been, you know, email based. Basically the first job I got at Deloitte, you get your corporate email, you start sending emails around the company. Your entire life is based on email. I find myself that I have gotten more legitimate connections and met interesting people by direct messaging via social media, not just LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, all of those platforms. I think because it breaks through a little bit of the clutter. We all get hundreds of emails every day, thousands every week. I can probably count on, you know, two hands the amount of direct messages that I get on a social media platform every week. So those tend to make an impact with me.
That's true. And the times that I've DM'd or messaged someone who I kind of thought probably wouldn't reply because they had that big of an audience, sometimes they do. And when they do, it's always through Instagram, Twitter, something like that.
Yeah.
You know, and because sometimes you can't even track down their email. And if you can, like, your odds of them opening it are probably pretty low. But every once in a while, and I bet a lot of it, the people that have a lot of followers, probably has to do with like when the message was sent to, and just sheer luck of like,
correct,
they happen to read it because they opened their phone at that time.
Yeah.
But for people that have a normal size audience, you have a very high probability of them seeing the message and them reading it. Yeah.
And you have to be prepared to hear nothing or hear no from 90% of the people you reach out to. And you have to be okay with that. And I think that's a skill that I don't know where I developed it, but I take no offense when people don't get back to me. It doesn't dissuade me from doing it again, and I take no offense. And if I feel like I put effort into the message, I honestly don't feel like I'm wasting that person's time either.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say so at all. And logically, it would be silly to take offense to that.
Yeah.
I mean, who cares? You don't even know this person. They could have ignored you for many different reasons. One of which might have been their kid was crying at the time, and then they got a different message the next day that they then ignored. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so who knows? Like, now I don't worry about stuff like that. I bet a lot of people do, but yeah, you shouldn't if you do. Who cares? Yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah. Well, I mean, we're done 43 minutes. Is there anything that you want to touch on that you think is interesting that we haven't touched on?
No, I mean, if people are listening in Austin, we're an Austin-based company, and we love to meet rising professionals, people who are interested in growing their skills at companies here. Check out the Invited MBA. The fall cohort is starting soon. This will be our 3rd year of running it. We also have a relationship with the University of Texas. We use our simulations in their MBA programs. And listen to the podcast, check out the TED Talk, and reach out to me on LinkedIn. We'll say it again. I'm active on LinkedIn. So if anybody wants to reach out, I will most likely get back to you.
Yeah, Matthew Confer on LinkedIn. What was the name of the podcast again?
The podcast is called Learn to Lead, and the TED Talk is called Before You Decide.
Cool. And the company's name is Ability.
Ability.
Not Agility.
Ability, not Agility. It is spelled weird, though. It is ABILITIE.
Yeah. Well, hey, cool, Matthew. I think there's a really good insights on leadership, some really good information on just some like really straightforward, common sense, but not thought of networking techniques. Really appreciate it. I think there was like a lot to learn in this one. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.